Welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where the inner warrior shines in their light. Today we have Christa Theg. Uh, she is a friend through a mutual friend and someone that I've worked as a colleague with on occasion, and she's just an all-around great human being. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us, Christa. Thank you from Massachusetts, right?
Yep, Massachusetts, just south of Boston.
Did you grow up in that region, or were you native somewhere else?
I've been here my whole 30 years and I think I'm kind of, oh, I'm sorry, I'm 31. But I'm kind of getting that itch to do. Yeah, I know it's perspective and time, right? It's
Right.
relative. Getting the itch to travel a little bit. So I haven't ever spent time on the West Coast, so maybe I'll make it that way.
You're south of Boston, so did you grow up where you're currently living? So small town girl?
Yeah, I still live in my mother's house. It's
Oh,
a three-generation household. My grandmother is 90 years old.
okay.
She lives downstairs. I'm in the in-law apartment that used to belong to my grandmother and grandfather. I know it's kind of weird in today's day and age to hear that kind of tight family unit. Like you don't
Yeah.
hear that very often. My mom didn't push me out and say, spread your wings at 18. She was like, be in a position where you can grow and have the ability to kind of find yourself and don't feel pressured to, feel the need to leave if you don't want to.
The actual, I mean, the Walton envisionment that brings is actually, you know, somewhat kind of cool because you're 30 and you still like your family enough to still live within their confines. And it's generational, so you have, that history. It's actually kind of a unique prospect, and I'd say from a parental standpoint, it's pretty unique to give your kid the grace of grow and leave when you need to, not push you out, here you go, fly, you know.
Yeah, I think there's a unique ecosystem that kind of happened. I did grow up with divorced parents and my grandparents stepped in early. So, I was raised with this weird dichotomy of like, okay, it was the 90s and like my mom was working hard, making sure that we had everything we needed. But I had like the 1950s, 60s grandparents. So I got to see that dynamic of like, the wife that was, you know, there with me, and my grandfather would do his stuff and come back and she'd have dinner ready for him. And, I kind of got the best of both worlds in that respect. I got to see a very hardworking, independent woman in my mother, but I also got to see a loving woman who cared for the total family. She had four kids, my grandmother. My mom had
Wow.
two, my brother and I. So it was kind of a really cool thing for me to sit back and just see the different generational stuff.
I love the perspective, and it takes, I mean, not everyone's self-aware enough to see all of that and appreciate all that. So it's really cool that you have that self-awareness. Off camera, you were telling me a little bit about, as a child you had compromised immune system. Can you uh, kind of describe what that situation was, and how that played a role in your upbringing?
Sure. So, rumor has it, as my mom puts it, she was like, you coughed the day you were born. And they said, huh, that's odd. And, I was blessed to have my grandmother and never went to daycare, but I got to the point where I was always sick. Every like 4 to 6 weeks, there was a pattern. And it got to the point where when I went to the doctor, they were like, well, had she gone to daycare and contracted something serious, it could have killed her. So
Wow.
I actually have kind of a variation of, I know a lot of people know David Vedder, the Bubble Boy.
Hmm.
I have a variation of what he struggled with. Granted, he had to spend his whole life in the bubble because of the components of his immune system that were missing. Thankfully, it's decades later. There were therapies in place that I, had for 20, good Lord, 20 years. I would get IVs it changed depending on the type of treatment I was getting, but I'd sit on the couch and with a nurse, I spent some time at Boston Children's getting treatments to keep my immune system in a place where I could have a fairly normal life. be able to interact with friends occasionally. But I didn't have the, go play sports, go have an active, very, I wasn't active with my peers because of the level of like illness that was there.
So
So
how does that affect a young girl? I mean, I totally different, but I remember, as a 6-year-old, my mom sticking me in a room to learn how to play guitar, and I just wanted to peek out the window and watch my friends play, right? So on a grander scale of to what you're dealing with, how did that, like, just watching the other kids be kids and out doing stuff, how did that affect you, psychologically wise, psychology wise?
maybe I guess on some level I'm an old soul because I would see things that they were doing and I'm like, what's the point? Like why do what they're doing? There's no purpose or meaning behind it. Where I would want to be personally reading books and expanding my knowledge base. For me, sit me down with a book, I could have a whole movie going on, whether it was like, a academic book or a fantasy book or an autobiography or a biography. Like I loved information and knowledge. It like playing and that type of stuff kind of felt like a waste to me.
Yeah, well, when you're kind of near death experience every day,
Yeah,
you get a different perspective on what is, worth your time.
for sure.
You know, and how long until you were able to interact on a more regular basis with others?
I think I could go to recess in grade school. I could do those things. I noticed over time the amount of stress that was put on me or I perceived was on me impacted my health, my mindset. Like if I was really anxious about something, my immunity would plummet and I'd get sick.
Mhm.
And
Mm,
I'd be out a common cold would knock me out for, 2 weeks minimum.
wow.
So I spent a lot of time resting. My grandma would read to me when I was young, and I would do a lot of sleeping. But I think that allowed me to really become aware of my environment and surrounding and kind of contributed to my desire to, learn about human behavior, why people did what they did. Even like that first point, why are those kids doing what they're doing? It's pointless. But,
Hmm.
you know, moving forward, you learn that that play, acting things out, prepares you for life. Of course, as a child, I didn't know this, but it made
Right.
sense down the line, as I went into my eventual career with mental wellness.
So what was the age when you started to kind of recover, or are you recovered? Are you beyond the
Yes.
treatment?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
So
I think
what age did that change for you? Because the world changes when that changes, for sure.
actually around the time of COVID, I was
Oh,
getting off of the treatments.
wow. So you were
That
already
scared
used
the
to
crap.
being,
Yeah.
yeah.
It scared the crap out of my mother. She's like, you really want to stop this now? And I'm like, yes. It's been 20
Wow.
years. Like, I'm learning to manage my health in an adult way. I see the factors that are contributing and being able to manage those factors um, in a proactive way makes such a difference. Um, and that does mean tailoring my life even now to some extent where I don't push myself or exert myself in ways that don't make sense. And I think
Hmm.
that that's a point. I feel blessed to have learned early the importance of how hard can I push myself? How far can I push myself? Because, a lot of the people I work with are hit that point or past it, and then they have these breakdowns, and it's like, man, I can help you figure out like and pull you back to that point of where did this start? I'm not one to dwell on the past, but I believe when we get ourselves to a stable place, we can find that insight of, okay, where did this start? And from that point, I can understand what led to the progression to where I am now. And I think that's important.
I think it's pretty amazing because you're describing your adolescence, you're describing your teenage years, and you're describing your early 20s, which for most people are very formative in different ways. but were huge for you because you mentioned off camera how you felt more adult than than normal. Like you were always around adults, so you had obviously adult conversation and adult thought and adult point of view, and so what age were you when you decided, you know what, I'm gonna be a mental health advocate?
Let's see. So initially, I remember in 8th grade in 2007, I had wrote I wanted to be a veterinarian. But I realized that that would mean I'd have to put animals to sleep, and in my heart, I could not do that, as I said off camera, I actually had to make the decision to put my dog down this past Monday, and
Mm,
I could not imagine doing that on a daily basis. I understand it is a gift to stop suffering, for an animal, but in my heart, I could not make that part of my daily existence.
hmm
So from there, I was like, okay, well, nursing. My mother's a nurse. I have a lot of nurses in my family or people in healthcare. But hold on, having an illness where if you're around illness, you're so likely to catch it makes that not really an option. So for me, that next kind of the parallel of that, okay, mental health. I can help people through helping them understand their inner workings. So that's kind of where that pivot happened, I think 2007, 2008.
and so you've been doing that for the past 17 years?
Yep.
Wow.
In different forms, obviously, but
And so as far as COVID goes, it didn't really impact you from a psychological world stopping standpoint because you had already had that kind of world. Obviously from a health standpoint, you were a little more fearful of what was going on, but um, how did it change once the world went back to opening up and being relatively normal again?
so for me, COVID, I feel funny saying this, but COVID created an opportunity in the industry of mental health that had not been present truly prior, like the ability to work with a person and not be physically with them. Because if a person was sick, that would mean, okay, well, how am I going to handle that? Do I cancel the session or do I let myself get sick and then there goes the rest of my caseload? So I could be not feeling well and I could have a session and I know I just have to hold it together long enough that I get through the session, give the person my full attention, and then I can go back to handling whatever I need to during the day. That was such a blessing from COVID. And that wasn't something I thought I'd see potentially in my lifetime, that type of model. And that was a huge blessing for me that came out of COVID, in my opinion.
And you've made it work well with your clients and your caseloads?
Well, like I tell my clients, I really like keeping my caseload on the smaller side. It doesn't always, benefit in a financial sense to do that. However, it lets me really connect with you and I remember the details. I don't need to like keep checking back to my notes from last time. I can say, "Oh yeah, I know we were talking about, you had this thing going on and oh yeah, how's your child's name? How's your pet doing?" Like I can get that right off my head because I don't have cases. I work with people. And
Mm.
there's that element that for me, keeping a smaller caseload is just there's just something about it that I feel is special.
That's a pretty interesting distinction that not a lot of healthcare people make. You're not a case, you're a person, and you're able to treat them as that. I'm curious because I mentioned during the introduction, you and I have a mutual friend in common, and you are working closely with him.
Yep.
I want to say as an admin type, maybe partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have some business projects together.
Okay.
Oh gosh, yeah, I really need to talk about that. So just prior to COVID, I had gotten, into this place where I was so unhappy with the type of work I was doing. And I was like, there's got to be more. There's got to be better. I started listening to Gary Vaynerchuk and
Hmm.
I was like, okay, cool. I want to pivot. Even if I am keeping a caseload in my mental health career, like I love that, but I want to be doing more. I feel called to more. So I was looking around and it just happenstance. I wound up in a call where, our mutual friend, I don't mind saying his name, Chad Nedland was speaking in this group. And, I was just so enthralled by how he was talking about, business and his passion. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to work with him. And oh, he is so respectful of the people he works with. And that was something I, for me, showing etiquette and respect for the people you're partnering with is huge. And that just made him as a person that much more attractive. And I was new, so forgive me for this, but like literally in the middle of the talk, he was like, "Well, do you have any questions?" And I'm like, "How do I work with you?" That was a little overstep on my part, but I was just so excited for the energy I saw in him, and I was like, this is a person I need to know and I need to work with, and that that was the best decision I've ever made. He Chad took me into a place where my all of my pre-framed life knowledge, it was all shattered. I was of the belief that, education was the way to go for everything. The higher the education, the better position you're in. And, you know, learning that there's other avenues and opportunities outside of strictly education. Like education's important, don't get me wrong. I will never, put down a good education depending on the field you want to be in.
Right.
Um, but at the time, I was so unhappy. I was in a relationship that just was not for me as much as I wanted to force it.
Mm.
And over the course of, a couple years, I found my way out of that relationship. Um, I shifted how I was working and, my relationships with people have changed for the better, family included. But I think the most important piece of it was I I found my faith, you know, and the cool part, I never thought I would be a person who would be like sitting on a call going, "Oh my gosh, like your faith is so important." And I grew up Catholic, so I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, I know God, I know how that works. There's
Yeah.
all the steps you need to take, they
Right.
they wrote it out for you." Um, but I was never encouraged to read the Bible, and I didn't realize until years later. And I was like, Chad, why is everything you talk about like so sound and grounded and like just it makes sense. It's like there's a natural order or something. He's like, yeah, everything I teach from the principles, they're all biblical. That's when like the little light went off and I was like, oh, okay. So I went from an understanding of religion to what it means to have faith and a relationship with God.
Hmm.
And
Vastly different.
big time. It really is. Um,
Was the event that you met him at, was it one of his events or was he speaking at somebody else's event?
he was speaking at somebody else's event,
Oh,
and funny enough, he was filling in for the speaker that was supposed to be there.
okay.
So it was all happenstance at that point.
It's funny because I met him at a SAL event and he was in a chat room. And of course, Chad being Chad, piping up and whatever. But it's funny because not that we're wanting to relive Chad's story, but he's a great guy.
Mhm.
Um, he didn't want to be at the event because he wants to serve people of faith and Christian entrepreneurs in business. And he went to that event with the mindset of these aren't my people. But because he chimed up and stepped up in the way that he does, over 100 individuals reached out to him individually afterwards. It shows that if you just stand in your authenticity and just be who you are with no preset motive of doing so, it shines a light that others want to be around. And I'm a Reformed Catholic as well. So um,
So you
I,
know.
I definitely know, and I definitely know, and I said most of my life, religion is the worst thing that ever happened to God. And, when you can separate the man-made part from the spiritual part and the essence of what Christ was on earth, then you can have that relationship that you're talking about. But
Yeah.
to me, and this is just my opinion to anybody else who's listening, so don't write in, I don't care. Um, if if you're only worried about what the pontiff in front of you is spewing, which is a fear-based way to come to God. You have to do all these things and you won't do this and you can't do that. Then you'll never have a true relationship with God. You have to really cut out that middleman and find him wherever. If you find him in a pew, great. If you find him on a rock, fine. If you find him near the ocean, wonderful. But you have to take the religion and separate it from the person or the faith. And like you said, your life just changes when you do.
Yeah, and I mean, it can be deceptive when you get hooked into religion. You know,
Hmm.
when you believe doctrine in a certain way, like I was trying to like that passage about don't be unequally yoked. If you come from it from a religious perspective, you can get hooked in with the wrong people. Like this happened to me at the age of 21. I was like, okay, I'm going to be graduating from college. Society says at this age, I should be married, I should have a family. So, I happened to meet someone and, they said, "Oh yeah, I'm in the faith like you." But at the end of the day, what I came to discover was just because a person says they're of the same faith, that doesn't mean they're made of the same stuff.
Right.
And even after that, I got into relationships with people who were like, "Yep, I'm a child of God," but what came of those things did not show the results of someone who really was there. At one point, I dated somebody who effectively told me because I was newer to the faith, if you're a Catholic, you're a Christian, folks. Like, I do appreciate the saying, like, a Catholic is a Christian, but not all Christians are Catholic. You know, you're under the same name, but a different denomination, so to speak. But I was a new Christian, and that made him weary of dating me because I wasn't in the faith long enough. And I'm like,
Hmm.
so like you need my member card with the stamp
Right.
with the
It's not a passport. It expires, I mean, listen, you're well versed enough now, but I know that person, I would have said, at Calvary, that guy only knew Christ for like 30 seconds and still entered the kingdom of heaven. So time is not of the essence in that matter.
right. And I'd like to think we always have that opportunity, and it's not up to our human brothers and sisters to, or our the people around us to make those judgments.
Right.
But we also can't take those judgments personally either, because that could really impact our ability to serve others if we
Hmm.
take everything personally.
So once you started working closer with Chad and it's a great illustration of, hey, if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no.
Yep.
Right? And imagine how your life would be now had you not raised your hand and asked, right?
Like, I don't even know if I want to go there.
Yeah. I
I'd
mean,
be miserable.
yeah. And you probably wouldn't still be in the mental health field because you would have been burnt out.
Oh gosh, you know, probably. Um, I yeah, I'd probably be on disability or something because I would be so stressed out that my body wouldn't be able to handle it, and I think that's one of my favorite things is when people come and they have those stresses where it's to the point of affecting them physically. Because when something is tangible like that, it almost makes things easier to work with when you have a sense of this is physically impacting my life. that's a little bit easier to start unwinding things than
Hmm.
when things are all wound up in the mind.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So, how did you meet your fiance? Because now you're past all the garbage men and you're on to
Ooh.
the, Prince Charming. How did you meet? How did you meet Mr. Wonderful?
So, okay, I have to go back a couple months, actually the guy that was like, "Hey, where's your Christian card?" He was talking about his church, and I was like, "Oh man, you're making this sound so great." And I was like, "I kind of want to go check it out even though it's like 45 minutes from where I am." Um and he looked uncomfortable, but I'm like, chill out. You made this sound so great. You sold this more than you sold yourself. Um, so I got involved in that church community, and it put me in a weird place because there was this level of self-discovery, but I think it created I'm like, okay, I want someone who's Christian. And I hadn't quite learned that lesson yet fully. Just because someone says they're Christian doesn't mean they're good for you. And that doesn't mean that they're living the tenets of someone who's done the work themselves and has that strong relationship with God where they will have that godly respect for their partner. Um, so I kind of went through some stuff with them, got baptized, dated a few people. Um, but I also came to realize something, and when it comes to churches, you've got to remember that they are people. And I had gotten myself in a couple situations with guys, and they were like, it seems like you're seeing a lot of people. We need you to step down from some of the things you're doing because we're unsure of where you are in things. And it kind of felt I was exploring my relationship, but they were trying to plug me in ways that didn't make sense to me. So it was actually around this time Chad was doing more, with Bible studies and things. So I was like, okay, I'm not feeling comfortable in this situation. I'm going to take a step back and seek a more online community when it comes to faith. And that has made the most sense thus far. In the midst of all of that, I wound up in a relationship very short term with another so-called Christian man who was very controlling. And it took me a little while to realize it. And I just got so frustrated. There were lies, there were like, oh, and I had just lost a whole bunch of weight, within I was overweight to the tune of like I think 230 pounds. Like that's not huge, but for me I was a larger woman. And that could be a whole separate conversation about weight, health, and all of that. But when your body changes so drastically, that kind of throws you too. So not only was I dealing with, okay, I'm finally healthy, my body now looks very different, and I'm trying to navigate that. And now attention is different. So when you have someone that seems to be doting on you and like, oh, let me buy you clothes, let me do this, let me do that, you feel loved in a different way. Finally realized it was coming from kind of a controlling place because the stories were changing. Like he had to know where I was, but I didn't have to know where he was, and then just different things. And I said, nah, this isn't for me. I need to end it. And at that point, I was like, I'm done. Sure, I want who God has for me, but I'm clearly not finding them. I want a puppy. I want to get a dog, and I kid you
Sure.
not.
Next best thing.
Well, I was like, let me expand, in an area of a career. I've always wanted a small dog. I want to make it a therapy dog, so I'm online looking for dogs. And this one night I'm like, "Ah, okay, Facebook. Facebook is open. I wonder who's on Facebook dating. One night, it won't be a problem, right? Just what harm could you have in one night? Go through usual suspects, and God bless him. Um, he had the worst photo ever. Very in your face. But I saw a dog in the photo, and it was this little tan pug. And, I sent out a few messages to other people, but I had sent him a message, hey, like, cute dog, whatever, like, I'd love to, talk, whatever. So we kind of started talking back and forth, and I think it was like within that week, we wound up at 99's, and that was our first date. Um, when I went, I don't know what I was expecting. He has his own story that's pretty incredible, but um, I forgot if he had told me or not, but they happened to have a trivia night that night, so it was very, very loud. And he kept like kind of talking loud because you had to, but he was leaning in, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like this weird thing's going on. He's like, oh yeah, I'm pretty profoundly deaf in this year, and I've like less than half my hearing in this year. And I'm like, oh God, okay, cool. Cool. I picked the loudest restaurant. And the worst part was he had asked to go to a restaurant up the street, but because I wasn't familiar with the area, I was like, I know how to get here. If like things go south, I can get out. And with my selfishness, I put us in a situation that was challenging. But the date went okay. We went home. He messaged me the next day, and it kind of went from there. But I think within the first message after, he was like, I really regret not kissing you.
Oh, nice.
Oh, it was nice that he didn't on one hand, because it was like how people approach that first kiss on a first date can be weird. I've had people who like ask permission, which is like, okay, like thank you for respecting the boundary. I've had people who felt it out like, whoa, what the heck was that? But there's like a fine line, I think. Some people are better than others at reading body language. I think asking is shows respect, but it can also ruin a moment sometimes,
Yeah. Well, then second date has to be at a library so he can hear you.
right? Where was our second date? I can't even remember. Um, but it just kind of went from there. We got along really well, and I'm the type of person like I know people who they'll have like 3 to 5 people that they're like dating at once. And I'm like, I don't see how you do it. Like for me, maybe I'll start with, 3 people, but the first person to get me on a date and I'm okay, I want to see where this is going. The other ones are gone because I want to focus on that one person.
Yeah.
I like being clear-headed.
I I'm trying to figure out how to ask this without it sounding harsh, but so please don't take, don't please don't take this any wrong way. But you've mentioned how many different relationships you had gotten yourself into.
Mhm.
Was part of that trying to satisfy a self-worth or seeking validation or some external thing that you weren't getting internally? Because that seemed like a lot of people in a short period of time.
Oh yeah. Well, I was so used to
Well, you're
long-term
only 30, so it's
relationships.
all a short period of time to me. I mean, I literally have t-shirts older than you, so it's okay.
Well, how do I was used to long-term relationships. I wanted to find my person, even from my first relationship lasted almost 5 years. The second long-term relationship I was in was 6. I had a couple like maybe 6 months to a year in between, but I was very like, I want to make something work. If you feel
Yeah.
like I'm your person, like let's go. Like
Hmm.
unfortunately, what I wasn't doing was making sure that, we wanted the same things and we're going in the same direction.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, something I heard a lot was you're such a great person and I don't want to let you go. That, in some cases I became emotional furniture, as I like to call it. Like I
Hmm.
we're we're taking care of each other's needs in a way, but it's not going in a direction that's productive. It kind of
Hmm.
stalls out and it's like, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
Um, but as far as like filling a need, I kind of want to say, I don't want to say I can't be an independent person, but I like I'm a whole person and I understand this. But when you find that person that's like, oh my gosh, like we're on the same wavelength,
Yeah.
there's an extra level of completeness, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
And I totally get that. It's you're seeking that emotional connection, not just the physical attraction, and you're trying to, again, uh, I'm going to use pop psychology because psychology is my major, and I just love the way the brain works. So
Yeah.
forgive me, you can, have my 5 cent, with my 2 cent change. You can just you spent your entire childhood thinking that's pointless, that's pointless, that's pointless. Why are you doing it? So it didn't allow a lot of room for just dating to date and enjoyment. It was a means to an end,
Yep.
like food is nourishment. Food isn't just sit around and enjoy. Food, let's get it done, right? So your dating was a means to an end. Are you going to be long term? Are you going to be long term? Dating to just date was pointless.
Yeah.
So if you found out it wasn't going anywhere, there was no need to go anywhere,
Yep.
right? Am I making sense?
Oh, yeah. No, like, I think it should be a means to an end because unless your goal is to find someone and just hang out and have fun, if that's you, great. But if you want, like, age-wise, there is a prescribed time, I'm a woman. You only have so long if you want to have a family. I know technology is amazing and like whatever, but you know, when you're the type of person that's like, no, I want to do things in a natural order and a way, like you only have so much time.
Yeah,
And especially in your 20s when you hear, oh my gosh, your 20s are your prime.
yeah,
I didn't know what I was doing in my 20s. Heck, like even today, I'll say, well, when I grow up,
right.
like what do I want to be?
Yeah,
I love what I do, but it doesn't feel like it's the end. Like I'm not comfortable with, I work in mental health. No, like I help people in other ways. And it's working out like what do those I don't want a pool. I want streams. I want things to come from a place, and they do. They come from a place of this is how I can help. Now, which way will serve you best? But I think for me personally, and this is the funny part, I'm great with other people. But when it comes to me, it's like, okay, I can give amazing advice and it's all things I would do. But in those moments, am I as calm as I tell people, like, okay, you need to take that deep breath? Am I able to take that deep breath? And there are moments where I'm realizing it's hard. Like,
yeah.
especially when you have someone you love and you reach that level of frustration.
Hmm.
And they're like, just tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're thinking. And it's like, if I speak to you right now, I'm gonna say things that I really don't mean.
Right. Well, you sort of mean, but you don't mean them in the way they're going to come out.
Like that
Uh,
wording is not great. Oh, well, which God forgive me. Like I said, my fiance has a level of deafness that has come in handy. There are times like I'll say something and he'll go, "What?" And I'm like, "Okay, I can edit that real quick."
right. Check.
Like,
Yeah.
do I tell him sometimes what the original thing was? Of course, like I'm not gonna like edit the whole
Yeah.
thing, but I'll say the main thing and he'll be like, "Is that really what you said?" And I'm like, no."
Yeah. Good thing we don't come with captions.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. So it's also interesting to me that now, and I say this because I know a little bit of your story. You've started a marriage trivia.
Yeah.
Is that is it a marriage trivia coaching, or is it a marriage trivia? Like, what's the essence of the thing that you've started?
So it's a game show where
Game
couples
show.
come together. Effectively, the goal is to just, emphasize the need for communication or the
Hmm.
importance really of communication within a marriage. It's just a time to come, have fun, win prizes. I like to give away a date night at the end, and additional prizes that are there. It's just something fun. It's it's new for me, the concept of fun.
Yeah.
But no, it's something that's, I think, important to remember that you need fun in your relationship, especially when it comes to your marriage,
Hmm.
and to bring back that, hey, date nights are important, and maybe it could kind of point out some of the things of, oh, maybe we don't communicate as well as I thought, or hey, maybe we actually do communicate better than we thought.
Yeah.
It's just to come together for a good time.
No, I think it's beautiful. My wife and I have been together 10 years, and
Yeah. Congratulations.
we still make each other laugh and smile, and we'll sometimes dance with no music, and it's or dance in the rain when it does here in Arizona once in a while. We just find ways to have our own unique fun, and we were thankful that there are no cameras in our house, because sometimes we're just overly silly. But it's important to continuously date each other, because catching the person isn't the ultimate prize. Keeping the person is the ultimate prize. So you have to use the same effort you use to chase them as you do to keep them. And people, and I've said this, like you, I'm an old soul, and I've been around quite a bit. But I used to say often, marriage or relationships is not 50-50, because what if I don't like the 50% you're giving? And
Yeah.
what if you don't like the 50% that I'm giving? It's got to be 100-100, you know, and you have to care as much about the other person as you do yourself. And, it's a kind of a cliche joke, but would you rather be right or happy? Sometimes you have to know when not to argue the point for the sake of just,
At peace.
yeah, your anthills don't have to become mountains, and you don't have to win every battle, but you do have to be respectful of your partner every day, and you do have to uh, communicate not in your language, in theirs. Because one of the things that happens for my wife and I is we will say something, and we still work on communication a lot because it's still a fine tuning point, but we'll say something and the other person will hear it from their filter, from their past, instead of the present to where it was meant. And it becomes a big issue for no reason. And so when you talk about love languages and things like that, yeah, I can speak my love language, but I need to understand and speak her love language, and vice versa. You know, she's a very emotional, affectionate giver. I'm more of a stoic, male type, for typecasting. But if we don't learn what actually, like, I'll go fill her car with gas and not tell her, and then she'll get in and call me, "Did you fill my tank? Oh, that was so sweet," or little things like that, because I know those mean a lot to her, and vice versa. So when you're trying to do this relational thing, you have to come at it from their understanding, and that takes good communication.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one thing to have the knowledge on a like literary level.
Hmm.
Like, okay, yeah, I know how this works, but even recently with my fiance, like to see, because I've never had this in a relationship before, like he pays attention. And to the point where like I'll mention something and then 2 weeks later his behavior's changed. Or I'm like,
Hmm.
where the heck did this come from? And he'll go, well, remember you said, or I saw you have a habit of doing this. Like we
Hmm.
were on a walk today and there's this tiny cul-de-sac. And I'm used to walking on the right side around, but because of the way we had entered the cul-de-sac this time, I was trying to go left, but he was trying to push me right. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, you always go that way. So I was like, wow, you seriously paid attention to that. And like, that's not something any of the other, people I'd been with in the past would have paid attention to. And realizing how important you are to the other person, that they would pay attention to something that's seemingly insignificant, just it blows my mind.
Yeah, it's in the details, and I can honestly say Elsa and I do that for each other. It's in the small details. Small example, she bought me this really cool second monitor for my laptop. Love the monitor. It's one of my favorite things that she's ever bought me, and she knows that. So she, unbeknownst to me, bought me a second one for the other side so then I could have three.
Yeah.
But before she gave it to me, she started talking to me about how I like, I was using the monitor, and she's like, how do you like it? Blah, blah, blah. And I was saying, one of my favorite gifts that you ever give me. I really love how easy it is, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, well, did you still like the idea of the triple. And I'm like, no, I don't really see a need for the triple. And I don't, I mean, two works great and it's easy, portable, blah, blah, blah. Well, then again, unbeknownst to me, because she'd already bought it, she went and took it back
Oh no.
because because I had already stated I don't want or need the triple. So like, but it's paying attention to those small details
Yeah,
and even the fact that she bought a second one, knowing how much I raved about the first one, right?
yeah.
So I think it's important, when we pay attention, it is in the smaller things, and those are the ones that really magnify. Are you communicating well? Are you paying attention? Do you have their interest in heart? Are you trying to do it just for you or for them? And it makes a huge difference in the relationship. It makes a difference in how you play, how you work, how you talk, how you interact. Like everything changes when you start paying attention to the details.
It really
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. And how does he know, what little details do you show him? Like, is there a little
So,
quirk?
um, I think what's hard for me is because of the types of relationships I've been in, I can be a little cold. I'm not used to being with affectionate people. So he is very affectionate to the point where it's like for him to really have a intimate experience, like there needs to be a level of not even just on a physical level. It's you need to show me that you're present, that you're not distracted, you are with me,
Right.
but touch is a big piece of things, right? So if I'm having a hard time with something and he's trying to hug me and I'm not having it, sometimes after I've cooled down a little bit, like I'll go over and hug him and say, "Look, I'm sorry. I'm just not I'm frustrated or I'm just having a rough time right now. Please know I appreciate you. And it's not you. I love you."
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear "it's not you, it's me" speech, so don't give that one. It's no, it's not you, it's me. So
Not in
uh,
that context anyway.
right, not in that context. So after the wedding, is he going to join the commune, or are you guys gonna fly the nest and have your own little spot?
So he's already in the commune. Like
Oh,
um he again, like, he had a place. Again, his life is so interesting, I always felt like I came from a place of serious privilege, and I've had this question of like, what did I ever do to deserve this? Why am I in a place where I have not earned this? This man has earned everything that he has, from the point of like at the age of 23, because of his situation, he went out, worked 3 jobs. He didn't have a car, did a lot of walking, around the city he was in, and saved the money to buy a house that he then allowed people to stay in if they were kind of down and out. And I am so beyond impressed with him, how far, what he's done in his life, how far, things have gone. And we do have kind of similar backgrounds of wanting a relationship and being with that person that we made the wrong decisions with people. Um, but to have kind of come out on the other side, found each other, and say, hey, your past doesn't matter. Does the past come up? Yeah, because we're like, how did you survive that? I don't know. How did you survive? Like,
right.
so I mean, it is talk, but not in a hurtful way. Like, oh my gosh, you are so different from the people I've dated in the past. Like that comes up a lot. And it's like
Yeah.
something funny though. Something that really shifted when I started dating him because he lived in a city that I refuse to date people from. I'm like, if they're from this city, they live in this city. No. If they're like he had so many things on my heck no list.
But he had a dog.
Well, I wanted a Yorkie, and he's like, I went from looking for a very small dog to a very large 6 foot something man. Like
Right.
so much for the dog. Um, but I went from what am I looking for to what don't I want? And all of those things he hit, he's never done drugs. He's not a drinker. Like, there are so many things that line up with my life that it wasn't like, okay, here's all the things I'm looking for. Because, I was told I wouldn't find a person like the person who's my fiance. I have very specific, likes and dislikes when it comes to certain things. And I always felt like I was compromising, when it came to physical intimacy, when it came to emotional intimacy. I was always the one doing the work. What could I do differently? What could I do better? And while initially that would help in the relationships because they were getting their way, it got tiring 'cause it was work.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying relationships should not be work.
No, there's work every day, but
It's a different type of
different
work.
type of work for sure.
And when it's teamwork and
Right.
not one person trying to pull the weight of the couple, it makes a
Right.
difference.
Yeah. When you're rowing in the same direction, it's much
Yeah.
better. Yeah. So, I'm sure that we could talk for many more hours and it's been, wonderful hearing your journey so far. What does 2025 look like for you other than the wedding?
Um, Man, I think just settling into married life, learning to navigate that space, growth in my personal business. I know he's started to show some interest in doing his own stuff, which I'm super excited about. Um, just looking at different opportunities personally and as a couple, you know, um, and looking forward to doing work with the game show. Obviously, you'll be seeing more of that. Um, I'm just excited to see what comes. I don't think I could predict I couldn't tell you for all the things that have happened over the last 6 months, they would not have been on my bingo card. So
That's
um
funny.
just enjoying life.
But see, that's the beauty of stepping into your authenticity and to who you truly are, because then you're living the life that God put inside you, and we have no idea what that means or how big that can be. And if we just do our part, God will continue to do his part. And we can plan and we can dream and we can hope and we can whatever, but the twists and turns that God has for us takes us in a whole new, much more beautiful direction. So I'm glad that you guys found each other, and I just know that you guys are going to do some amazing things as a young family. So I'm going to ask you the last question that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
What does a warrior spirit or having a warrior spirit mean to Krista?
I think having a warrior spirit to me means that life doesn't keep you down. You always know what you're fighting for and you're always pushing for it, but you know when to take time to step back, reevaluate so that when you move forward, you're able to do so with your highest intentions and the most energy possible in pursuing your passions.
That's awesome. I love having you in my tribe and in my circle. I know that you are just a wonderful person to be around, and I'm so thrilled for where life is taking you. And if you ever need anything, let Elsa and I know, and we'd be glad to help any way we can. I don't know if we'll have your game show anytime soon. We want to keep our peace in the house, but
But you
very
guys are you
competitive.
guys are a team. Like, we're not
Yeah.
splitting you up.
Yeah, we're very competitive. What do you mean you said that? No, I appreciate it, and thank you for doing this tonight. And I hope you have a wonderful, blessed marriage, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you for having me, Daryl. I appreciate it.
All righty, bye now.
Bye.